morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. I'm joined by Amber and Nomiki. Love to see you both get into the news.
How you doing?
Let's do it.
All right. Trump and Vice President Harris are locked in a dead heat with just 2 weeks before Election Day. According to U.S. Today, Suffolk University polling that Harris is up 45% to 44%. Emerson College says that she is also leading 49 to 48%. But Fox News polling shows Trump has regained the lead with 50% to 48%. He's also gained ground in the swing states, so much so that pollster Nate Silver now rates the chances of a Trump win as slightly more likely than a Harris win, 52% to 47%. But clearly, this is anyone's game. Now, early voting is already underway. Nearly every state in the country offers some form of early voting. More than 15 million Americans have already cast their ballots in the 2024 election. Polls opened in Florida and Texas on Monday, while key swing states like Georgia and Nevada opened their polling booths last week. 1 million people in North Carolina have hit the polls, and already Georgia has broken its early turnout record with 1.4 million ballots cast.
According to Vote Tracker, on early and mail-in voting conducted by University of Florida, 48.1% of Democrats have voted, while 31.8% of Republicans and 20.1% of non-affiliated have voted. These results are based on data available from 23 states, including key states Pennsylvania, Arizona, Florida, Nevada, and North Carolina.
While Democrats have a clear edge on early voting so far, Republicans have embraced the practice of hitting the polls before Election Day, which is eating into the Democrats' advantage. Despite former President Donald Trump sending mixed signals on the issue, more Republicans are turning out early this cycle than in prior years. 31% of GOP voters have turned in ballots this cycle, compared to 24% in 2020. And in some of these key swing states, Republicans are outpacing Democrats on the early voting metrics. In Nevada, Clark County specifically, Republicans are outpacing Democrats by a 2-to-1 margin. In Virginia, the counties that went for Trump in 2020 have been returning early ballots at a higher rate than some of the blue counties. So whatever the RNC has done since 2020 to encourage early voting and mail-in voting appears to be working.
Yeah, if I was the Democrats, I'd be a little bit worried right now. The trends are going Trump's way. As I mentioned, Nate Silver now has him up just very slightly. Those swing state polls have gotten very, 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 very close, but with Trump a little bit ahead, and that's where it's going to matter. And, of course, we have to remember that the polling error last time was so dramatically in Democrats' favor that I feel like if the polling shows that it's close, it could actually be Trump very far ahead.
I don't look at 2020 for any sort of methodology, and I don't think I think it's malfeasance for anybody in political.
I think because of the COVID.
Because of COVID. It was just the numbers were so irregular, there was no way to truly have an accurate sense, especially with all the new mail-in voting and in a lot of states early voting for the first time. What I do find also malfeasance is for folks to be reporting on early voting numbers. Have we learned anything from previous elections when the pollsters are doing exit polling, knowing that it's flawed, especially when it's so close?
But
and early voting is something that can influence the outcome, right? When you start pushing those, it could go in either favor, by the way. It could hit Democrats might be more motivated now seeing these numbers come in for Trump and the pace, or vice versa. What is interesting to me, though, and is an indication, is that in Michigan and North Carolina, the RNC, the Republican parties in those states, pushed to challenge overseas voting, whether it was veterans or overseas voters who have the right, if you're an American citizen, to vote. And both courts, appointees, Republican, struck it down. And in Michigan, the judge was pretty clear. He said this baseless lawsuit targeted the voting rights of U.S. citizens and their families living abroad, including the children of active duty service members. It represents a new low in the ongoing PR campaign to cast doubt on the security of Michigan's election. That came from the judge. That was not a partisan response. That was something saying, you're desperate, and you can't be pushing these things in the last minute.
Well, we do know in the terms of the early vote numbers, those are not based on exit polls. Those are based on required reports that come from the secretaries of state on a daily basis. So I guess your suggestion that these are influencing outcomes of the election, would you support some kind of law to require secretaries of state not provide people that information?
No, I think it's journalistic, just like you're allowed to have an exit poll, but journalists
But it's public information.
I mean, it's Republicans who would want the election just to take place on election day, right? No early voting, just you got to show up in the day on person and vote, and if you don't, you don't.
Sure.
You're saying the early voting is going to influence stuff.
No,
I think Republicans would be like, your terms are acceptable.
Right. I said it could go either way. But what I'm saying is that as journalists and reporters and commentators, it's just a little malfeasance because we don't have, it's not an accurate number, and of course it can influence.
How is it not accurate?
Because it's not the final result. Every day it changes, and the reports come out every day, but it just means that, we have to be a little bit more careful in letting the public understand this is not the full number, numbers change every day. It's like...
I think people are smart enough to know that.
Another number I saw this morning that was worth bringing up, Arab Americans specifically, there was a poll showing Donald Trump ahead of Kamala Harris with this group specifically. I mean, it's close, like 45 to 43%. And even in the poll, they asked about the voters' views on Israel-Gaza, and they trusted Trump more to resolve this problem than Harris. This is the kind of thing, that if this costs thousands of votes in Michigan, that could decide the election.
There were also some reports coming out of people who were getting text messages from phone bankers for Kamala Harris who expressed that they weren't going to support her or volunteer for her because of her position on the Israel-Gaza conflict. And the phone bankers were actually arguing back with them and getting incredibly snarky, which I think is like pretty much, phone banking 101 is that you probably shouldn't condescend to the person.
We don't want your vote.
Right.
I got a phone call the other night, and it was from Arizona. Now, I have not voted. I mean, I was 18 or 21, I think, when I was in college last time I voted, or 22, something like that. And they called me up, and I'm like, you're really digging through. Like, can you clean out your voting rolls? I vote in New York, and I have voted in New York, and that's my registration. But I think that these voting rolls really need to be cleaned out because this happens all the time, every election, where you're getting phone calls. I'm sure you get them from Michigan.
I have a Michigan cell phone number.
Yep.
I get probably 50 texts a day. It's telling me about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Yes, it's very annoying. Nice. I cannot vote in the state of Michigan.
But it just shows you
stop
how important this election is to both parties. They are going through like the least likely voters. Triple prime are the most likely voters. So I never get calls in New York because they're like, well, we know you're going to show up and vote Democrat or vote progressive, even in that case. But for Arizona to be going through and saying, well, that person they're Democrat, they haven't voted in 20-something years. I'm going to give them a call. But they were so nice on the phone. And I said, just keep doing what you're doing. And then the guy was like, I live in Brooklyn. I know who you are. So I was like, oh, that's weird. Okay.
Well, coming up next on Rising, what happened to a reporter who allegedly got a little too close to a major presidential candidate? We'll be talking about that. It's coming up next on Rising.